Wyoming Territory, August 1878. The sun was just beginning to settle behind the Red Ridge when Colter James heard the scream. He was on his way back from Cheyenne, riding the trail between the cottonwoods with 2 fresh horses and a pack of supplies. The sound sliced through the stillness high, sharp, and panicked, not the cry of an animal. Human. Colter nudged his horse into a gallop. He found her tied to a broken fence post behind the old Miller barn, half collapsed now, left to rot by the river bend. Her dress was torn at the sleeve, her wrists raw from rope. She looked up when he dismounted, eyes wild but clear. Dark brown hair clung to her cheeks with sweat, and she did not beg or cry, she just stared at him. "Please," she said, voice hoarse, "I did not agree to any of this." Colter cut the rope without a word. She flinched when he touched her, but she did not pull away. Her hands fell free and she stumbled forward, catching herself against his chest. He held her steady. "What happened?" "They said I owed them," she whispered. "Said my father promised me to pay his debt. But he died 5 years ago. I had no part in it." Colter's jaw tightened. "Who?" "3 men. One called himself Rudd, said he bought me fair." Colter looked around. No one in sight, but the tracks in the dust told him they had not been gone long. "What is your name?" he asked. "Presley," she said. "Presley Kincaid," he nodded once. "Come on, I am taking you with me," she hesitated. "Where?" "Anywhere but here." Colter helped her onto the horse and climbed up behind her. As they rode, she leaned into him like she had not allowed herself to lean on anyone in a long time. By the time they reached his cabin tucked low in the hills outside Laramie, the sky was full of stars, and Presley had not said another word. He helped her down, let her sit by the fire while he heated a tin of beans and poured water from the well. She watched him in silence. "You live out here alone?" she finally asked. He nodded. "Nearest neighbors about 5 miles east." "I like the quiet. You always pick up women tied to fence posts," he glanced at her. "Only the ones who do not deserve to be there." That earned him a faint, tired smile. The next morning she woke to the smell of coffee. Her wrist was bandaged and a clean blouse hung on a nearby chair. She dressed slow, every muscle aching, and stepped outside to find Colter chopping wood. He looked up. "You sleep all right?" Presley nodded. "Better than I have in weeks." He handed her a cup of coffee without asking anything more. She sipped it and stared at the trees lining the ridge. "I did not ask you to help me," she said softly. "I know." "But you did." Colter met her eyes. "Because no one should be sold like cattle, not even if some dead man made a deal." She blinked fast and looked away. He gave her space after that, letting her rest while he worked the land. She stayed in the spare room, helped with meals, never once asked to leave. Still, Colter knew she was not healed, not really. Her eyes stayed sharp, her posture tight. She flinched at loud sounds and never turned her back to a door. That changed the day the men came back. It was late afternoon. Colter was in the barn when he heard the horses. He stepped out and saw 3 men riding up the trail, dust rising behind them. Presley was on the porch. When she saw the man in front, Rudd, her face went pale. "Inside," Colter said. Presley did not move. "He will not stop." "I will." Rudd pulled his horse to a halt. "You got something that belongs to me." "No," Colter said. "I have someone who does not belong to you or anyone else. She was part of a deal. She never signed it. She is mine by law." Colter stepped forward. "Then you can take it up with the sheriff in Laramie, but you are not taking her by force." Rudd sneered. "You willing to bleed for a girl you just met?" Colter's hand went to the rifle leaning against the porch post. "I am." Rudd's eyes narrowed. "You do not even know her." "I know enough." The standoff lasted a long minute, then Rudd spat in the dirt. "This is not over." Colter did not answer. He stood still until the men turned and rode off. Presley came down the stairs, slow as if her legs might give out. "You should not have done that. He was not going to take you. They will come back. Then I will be ready." She looked at him, something shifting behind her eyes. "Why do you care?" Colter's voice was quiet. "Because I see you." Presley swallowed hard. "You do not even know what I have done." "I do not need to. I see who you are now." And that was the first time she let him touch her hand without pulling away. Days passed. Then weeks. She helped him milk the goats, mend the fence, cook meals. They talked more. She told him about her mother dying when she was 12, about growing up in debt and fear. He told her about the war, about the brother he lost, about why he never left the territory. One evening, she found him sitting on the porch, whittling a piece of cedar. She sat beside him. "You never asked me what I want." Colter put down the knife. "What do you want?" She looked out at the quiet hills. "To choose. Just once in my life I want to choose where I go, who I am with, what my life looks like." He nodded. "Then you will." She turned to him. "You really believe that?" "Yes." Presley searched his face. "You would not ask me to stay. I would want you to, but I would never ask." She was quiet for a long time, then she reached over and took his hand. "I want to stay." Colter's fingers curled around hers. "You sure?" "I am not scared anymore," she said. "Not when I am with you." And for the first time she smiled like she meant it. The first frost came early that year. Thin silver spread across the grass before dawn, and Presley wrapped her shawl tighter as she stepped out to gather kindling. Colter was already at the edge of the yard, checking the line where they'd strung rabbit snares the week before. He moved like someone used to the land, not fighting it, just listening. She watched him a moment before walking down the slope. "You said the river runs slow come winter," she said, crouching beside a patch of dry brush. He nodded without looking up. "Slower than it has. I want to learn to fish it." Colter straightened and met her eyes. "You will," she studied his face. "You always say that." "Like there's no doubt." "There isn't." They walked back to the house together, her basket light in her arms, the morning quiet but not empty. After breakfast, she helped patch the window frame in the back room. The wind had found a new way in, and neither of them liked waiting for cold to prove itself right. Later, while Colter hitched the wagon, Presley folded away the last of the summer linens. She ran her fingers over the fabric frayed, washed thin, and felt the weight of a life made by hand. She had never known anything that held up as well as this life did. When he came in, he wiped his hands on his trousers and leaned against the post. "Supply trip before the snow sets in," he said. "You want to come?" Presley looked up from her sewing. "You trust me to ride into town with you?" "I trust you to ride anywhere you please." She stood and took her coat from the wall. The road to Laramie was quieter than she remembered. They passed only one wagon heading west, the driver nodding as they rolled by. Presley held the reins steady while Colter rested his legs, stiff from an old break. He didn't complain about it, never had, but she noticed the way he shifted his weight more often as the years he carried caught up to him. "You ever think about leaving?" she asked. He glanced toward her. "Leaving what?" "This place, Wyoming, starting somewhere new." He was quiet a moment. "I did once. After the war, thought maybe I'd go to Colorado, maybe even down to New Mexico, but I never did." "Why?" he shrugged. "Guess I was waiting on something to make staying feel like a choice." She looked out at the ridgeline. "I think I understand that." At the mercantile, Colter loaded flour, salt, and a bolt of wool Presley picked out herself, deep green with threads that caught the light. She didn't ask if it was too much. He didn't say a word about it, just paid and carried it out. Back at the wagon, she settled beside him and watched the town behind them grow smaller. "You know what I miss most?" she said. He waited, reading by lamplight. "When I was little, before everything turned hard, my mother used to read to me old stories, the kind where people found each other and stayed." Colter kept his eyes on the trail. "I've still got my mother's Bible, prints faded, but the words hold." She looked over. "Will you read it to me sometime, if you'd like?" They didn't say anything else until the cabin came back into view. Presley climbed down first and reached to help him with the sack of cornmeal. That night, she lit the lamp herself and set the Bible on the table. Colter sat across from her, his voice low and steady as he read aloud. She didn't follow the words so much as the way he spoke them, like they weren't just scripture but something carried. When he finished, she didn't move to blow out the lantern. Instead, she rested her elbow on the table, chin in her hand. "You ever think about what it would have been like if we'd met some other way, not with me, tied up like that?" "I think about what it means that we met at all," he said. She reached across the table, fingers brushing his. I still wake up sometimes thinking I've been dragged back, she whispered. You're not, her hand closed around his. I know because I get to decide now. Colter nodded once. That's the only thing I ever wanted for you. Presley stood and crossed to him. She didn't ask permission. She didn't hesitate. She just leaned in and pressed her forehead to his. I want more than a roof and kindness, she said. I want a life with you. His hand came to her waist, steady and warm. Then we'll build it. And for the first time she felt the future stretch out before her like open land. Not a trap, not a debt, just room to become. Presley sat on the porch step sewing a button onto Colter's clean shirt, her fingers moving slow but sure in the late light. The sun had dipped behind the slope, painting the sky in long strokes of linen and rust. Behind her, the cabin settled quiet around the day's work windows shut against a rising wind, kettle cooling on the stove. The land had begun to lean toward winter. Colter came up the path with a satchel over one shoulder and mud on his boots. He didn't speak right away, just set the bag beside the door and took a seat across from her, rubbing the back of his neck. They're moving cattle through the flats, he said. Talk is, the trail boss lost 2 men to fever last week. Presley looked up. That'll slow them. They're still pushing, snow's late, might think they've got time. She nodded, tying off her thread. Men always think there's more time than there is. Colter studied her a moment, then motioned toward the satchel. Got something for you in there. She raised an eyebrow but didn't move. Go on, he said, voice quiet. Presley opened the flap and pulled out a small wooden box with a brass latch. Inside, nestled in cotton, lay a pair of scissors with carved bone handles and a spool of dark blue thread finer than anything she'd worked with since girlhood. I saw that color and thought of you, Colter said. It's steady, doesn't shout. Presley traced the edge of the spool. You thought of me while picking thread. I think of you more than you know. She closed the box, fingers resting on the lid. No one's ever given me something just because, not without expecting something back. I expect you'll use it, he said. That's enough. She stood and brushed off her skirt. Come inside, you're tracking mud. Later that night, as wind creaked along the eaves, Presley sat at the table working stitches into the wool he'd bought her. The green caught fire under lamplight, deep and rich. Colter watched from his chair by the hearth, one leg stretched out, a book balanced on his thigh. You always wanted a place like this? She asked without looking up. He turned a page. Didn't think I'd get it. But once I stopped chasing what I'd lost, I started building what I could hold. Presley set her needle down. I've been thinking about what to make of this life. Not just the days, but the shape of them. I want to learn how to keep bees. I read once they don't sting when you move slow. Colter folded the corner of his page. We'll check with the Parson family come spring. They keep 2 hives east of the bend. I want to trade for a loom, too, she continued. Spin wool, maybe dye it with berries, he nodded. You've got a good eye for color. Presley leaned back in her chair. It's strange wanting things. For a long time I didn't dare. It's not strange, he said. It's living. She looked at him across the table, her expression softer than it had ever been. You gave me that, he shook his head. You took it. The next morning, frost lay thick along the fence rails. Presley cracked the ice from the water trough while Colter mended a broken gatepost. When she stood and wiped her hands on her apron, she called out to him. I want to put something in the ground before the freeze. Colter set down his hammer. You've got seed? Just some roots I saved from the kitchen. I know they won't hold through snow, but I want to try. He walked over and took the spade from the barn wall. Where do you want your garden? She pointed to a patch behind the smokehouse, where the sun still touched the dirt in the early hours. They worked side by side, turning the soil and burying the cut roots in rows no wider than a boot. Presley planted each one with care, like she was tucking in something fragile but worth the effort. When they finished, she brushed the dirt from her palms and looked at him. I don't know if they'll take. Doesn't matter, Colter said. What matters is you planted them. She stepped close then, hands still gritty, and pressed her forehead to his chest. He held her there, arms firm around her, the breath between them steady. "I never thought I'd feel safe in my own skin," she murmured, "but I do here." "With you?" He didn't speak, just rested his chin against her hair, the smell of earth and cold wind between them. That night she lay beside him for the first time. Not out of fear, not out of need, but choice. The fire burned low, casting shadows that reached across the floor like soft hands. Presley turned to face him, her fingers finding his under the quilt. "I'm not afraid of tomorrow anymore," she said. Colter brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. "Then we'll meet it together." Outside, the frost thickened, but inside, the warmth between them held. It would be a long winter, but they had time. And this time, it was theirs. By late November, the snow came with weight. Not a dusting, but a steady, quiet fall that blanketed the hills and dulled the sounds of the world. It softened the edges of the trees and pulled the sky low. The garden beds Presley had planted were buried now, but she didn't mourn them. The planting had done its work. Colter was carving fence pegs at the kitchen table when Presley laid a folded sheet of paper beside him. He set down his knife and looked at her, waiting. "It's from the sheriff," she said. "I walked to the post shack this morning. He sent word." Colter opened the letter, reading slowly, his brow furrowed. "He says Rudd's been arrested, tried to press his claim again in Rawlins. Turned violent with the wrong woman's husband." Presley crossed her arms. "So it's settled." "He won't trouble you anymore," Colter said. "That part of it's finished." She didn't reply right away, just moved to the hearth and stirred the coals, her face half in shadow. When she turned back, her eyes were steady. "I want to marry you," she said. Colter didn't move. "You sure?" "I've had time to weigh it. I've lived with you through quiet and storm. I know how you carry things. I want to carry them with you." He stood and crossed to her, his hand closing around hers. "I never thought I'd have a wife," he said. "Not after the war, not after the way I kept myself back, but I want you, not just here, not just beside me. I want your name on my land and your voice in my house." "Then we'll do it proper," Presley said. "Not for town gossip or to make anything look right, just because it is." They were married at the cabin 3 mornings later with the Parson twins standing witness and Mrs. Parson pressing a sprig of juniper into Presley's palm for good fortune. Snow lined the roof, and the horses stamped in their traces, but the cold didn't reach the circle they made under the bare cottonwood. After the Parsons rode off, Presley leaned into Colter's side, her gloved hand tucked beneath his coat. "That wasn't so bad," she murmured. "Never figured I'd take vows wearing my work boots," he said. She looked up at him, her cheeks flushed from the cold. "I'd have married you in the middle of a cattle yard if it meant I got to go home with you." Inside, the fire had burned low. Presley added a split log, then unpinned her shawl and hung it by the door. "Do you think it's strange?" she said. "How quiet it feels now." "I thought I'd be more afraid somehow, like something would come to take it back." Colter shook his head. "It's yours. No one can take what you've earned." She turned toward him, her expression unreadable for a beat. Then she reached up and touched his cheek. "I used to think safety meant disappearing. Now I think it means being seen and still being left whole." He caught her hand and kissed her palm. "You're not just whole," he said. "You're strong. You've been strong every day I've known you." Presley's voice dropped. "I want to build a room on the south side, for when the time comes." Colter eyed her. "You think it's coming?" "I think it might," she said. "And if it does, I want that child to grow up knowing love isn't something you beg for, it's what you grow slow with care." He nodded once. "We'll start it after thaw. I'll cut the pine myself." They didn't speak for a time after that. The fire crackled low. Outside, the wind pressed against the shutters, but it couldn't get in. Presley leaned her head to his shoulder, and he folded her into the curve of his body like it was the most natural thing in the world. "I never thought I'd be someone's wife," she said into the quiet. Colter rested his chin to her hair. "You were always meant to be more than someone's. You're your own. I'm just lucky you chose me to walk beside you." Presley didn't answer, not in words. She simply reached for his hand and held it there between them, warm and sure. The kind of hold that didn't ask for anything more than what already was. And for the first time, the past felt distant. Not gone, not forgotten, but small in comparison to what they had built. The snow began to recede in early March, pulling back from the edges of the pasture in wet, sinking patches. The sky took on a cleaner blue, and the days, while still cold, stretched longer. Presley stood at the edge of the hollow behind the smokehouse, watching where the earth had begun to show again. A few of the onion shoots she had planted in the fall had pushed up through the frozen crust, pale green and stubborn. Colter emerged from the barn, sleeves rolled to the elbows, sawdust clinging to his forearms. He carried a plank of fresh milled pine across one shoulder and stopped when he saw her. "They came through," she said, not turning. He stepped beside her, setting the board down gently in the grass. "They'll be stronger for what they came out of," he said. Presley crouched and brushed snow from the soil around the chutes. A slow smile touched her mouth, something quiet and satisfied. "I want to start the addition this week," she said. "No sense waiting for perfect weather." Colter nodded. "I've drawn plans, nothing fancy." "Room enough for a cradle and a chair." She straightened and looked at him. "There's time yet, but I want it ready. I want to be ready." Colter reached for her hand, his palm rough against hers. "We'll build it right." They worked side by side each day, cutting timber, shaping joints, raising the frame as the ground hardened beneath their boots. Presley learned to notch beams, to check for level, to hammer without bending nails. At night, she soaked her hands in warm water scented with dried mint, then curled against Colter under the quilts, her body already changing in ways neither of them spoke of yet. By mid-April, the new room stood finished, paneled in smooth pine, a small window cut to catch the morning light. Presley stitched curtains from the green wool she'd saved, now faded slightly at the fold lines but still rich. She lined a low shelf with books Colter never used but wouldn't part with. Beside the hearth, he placed the cedar cradle he'd carved through the long winter, its sides etched with quiet details cottonwood leaves, a pair of sparrows. The first spring storm rolled in one evening just after supper. Rain struck the shutters in steady rhythm, and thunder moved low across the hills. Presley stood at the doorway of the new room, her arms crossed lightly over her chest. "My mother used to say storms brought truth," she said. Colter leaned in the doorway behind her. "What truth you reckon this one's carrying?" "That I'm not afraid of what comes next," she said. "Not anymore." He reached for her, pulled her gently back against him. "I've never known anyone to meet life the way you do," he said. With both hands open, Presley rested her head against his jaw, her voice scarcely above the sound of the rain. "Then take it with me, all of it." He turned her slowly in his arms and kissed her, not with urgency but with certainty. A kind of promise that didn't need words, already spoken in every shared morning, every built wall, every silence held without fear. That summer the child was born at dawn, while the birds were just beginning to stir in the trees. A girl, small and dark-haired, with a cry that rose sharp and sure. Presley held her close, sweat dampening her temples, and when she looked at Colter, her eyes were full with something deeper than relief. "She's strong," she whispered. "She's her mother's daughter," he said. They named her Clara, after the river that cut through the lower pasture, the place where Presley had once first stood and said she wanted to stay. The name felt right, clear and quiet and enduring. Presley healed strong, walking the perimeter of the land with Clara wrapped snug against her chest. She hummed old tunes beneath her breath, songs she thought she'd forgotten until they tumbled loose from memory. Colter trailed behind most days, tending the orchard rows, checking the fence line, but always with one eye on them. In late August, they hosted a gathering. Just 12 folks, neighbors mostly, and the Parson twins, now lanky and sunburned. They brought jars of pickled beets, a roast chicken, and a fiddle that stayed in tune long enough for dancing. Presley wore a cream-colored dress she'd sewn herself, and Clara slept through most of the laughter, her small body wrapped in a quilt stitched from scraps saved over 2 winters. As dusk fell, Colter took Presley's hand and led her a little away from the circle of lanterns, out beneath the cottonwood where they'd spoken vows. "You remember that first winter?" he asked. "I remember every day of it. I didn't know how much I needed you until you were already here." Presley leaned into him, her hand sliding beneath his coat to rest against his side. "And I didn't know what love felt like until it stopped asking me to prove I deserved it." He kissed her slowly, the kind of kiss that didn't chase anything, just stayed. They watched the lanterns flicker in the distance, heard the fiddle pick up again, and behind it, the soft murmur of their daughter waking. Colter touched her cheek. "Let's go home." Presley smiled, the kind of smile that held years inside it. "We already are." And they were. In every way that mattered, they already were.